Hello everyone, it's David again, and I am here with Season 1, Episode 2, titled Soul Hunter. This episode is going to also spawn a lot of mini story arcs throughout the scene. In this episode also deals a lot with death. Now in the West, we don't deal very well with death and dying. In the East, they deal a lot with it. Their life expectancy isn't as high as ours, plus a lot of the Hindu and Buddhist beliefs tend to paint a rosy picture of death, that if you do good things, you can attain higher realms, eventually becoming your own god, and then attaining Buddhahood, hopefully. Or in the West, we have this stark dichotomy. Okay, you do good things, you do penance or whatever you wish to call it. You do all this really, really, really good stuff, and if you're lucky, you'll go to heaven. If not, you're going to hell. Straight just going to hell. Nothing in between. You're either good going to heaven, or you're a horrible, nasty person going to hell. Well, J. Michael Straczynski borrows a little bit from Buddhism and Hinduism, and you'll find that in a lot of his works. What happens if there's other alternatives to the dichotomies, or to the gradual steps to heaven, or the gradual steps to hell? What if there is an alien species advanced enough to catch your soul, put it into a bottle for its own enjoyment? Now, it's the more exact saying in this particular instance, it's a sphere. And he has this species, aptly named the Soul Hunters. And these Soul Hunters go around, and to the really, really good people, they try, at least, capture their souls, put them in these spheres, and then they can talk to them and laugh with them and enjoy a nice bottle of champagne or whatever. In this episode, starts off, we get introduced to Dr. Stephen Franklin, the actor Richard Biggs II, who has sadly passed away at a very young age. And I'll let you go ahead and read, if you want to read into that sort of thing. I'll let you go Google that yourself. It starts off with the Soul Hunter ship almost slamming into Babylon5, and Commander Sinclair goes out and captures it. And Commander Ivanova asks him, and this is another mem, Babylon5 mem, asks him, why don't we just blow the damn thing out of the sky? And he says, only if it is a clear and present danger. And she quips, this is not a clear and present danger. I must read the rule book again. And so if you want to make a mental note of that, you will see an awful lot of that in the Babylon5 chat groups. Delenn, when she sees the Soul Hunter, has a very visceral reaction. She grabs Garibaldi's shooter, his new PPG, by the way, that shoots like little red and orangish shots instead of the beams of light that we saw in the pilot episode. She grabs his PPG and tries to kill the Soul Hunter in Dr. Franklin's laboratory. And of course they wrestle it out of her hand, and she basically identifies to them what a Soul Hunter is. They are immortal. They can be extremely old. I think the one that they captured is like over 6,000 years old. They can sense the coming of death, and they can steal your soul and enclose it into a globe kind of area, and then they collect a lot of them, and it supposedly makes them wiser and happier and all kinds of good things. This particular Soul Hunter, we'll find out later, was sent to collect the soul of Dukat, who was the Minbari's most sacred leaders, and Delenn, among others, stopped him, created a wall of bodies so that the Soul Hunter could not get to Dukat. This shamed this particular Soul Hunter in front of his order. And so he's decided to go upon a radical solution, and instead of waiting for death to come naturally or through suicide or assassination or whatever, that he was just going to go out, find the people that he thought were worthy of collection, and just basically kill them himself and steal their souls prematurely. So this particular one came to Babylon 5 because to steal Delen's soul. And we learn that a little bit later on in the episode. That Delen also was a favorite of Ducat, his favorite student. We learn that later. And we learned that, or hear for, I think, about the first time that she was Sitai. Now, what on earth is that? And that is, we learn, an honorific given to the ruling council of Minbari. And the question becomes, and Commander Sinclair posts it later on, why on earth is a member of the Minbari ruling council playing ambassador on Babylon 5? That would be like assigning Vice President Kamala Harris to go be the ambassador to Belize or something along that nature. You know, why on earth would somebody that high be doing here in the middle of the craziest and one of the most unsafe parts of the galaxy? Let's see here. We also learned during this, talking to Stephen Franklin, that the typical human lifespan is about 100 years. Now, having been a registered nurse in the United States, our typical lifespan is about 75 years. So if the typical lifespan is 100 years, they must have had some pretty good advancements in science and technology to get us to that point. Probably a cure for heart disease and much more effective treatments for cancer in order to get a lifespan of 100 years. Another one of my favorite quotes that I wrote down is Ivanova. And can someone who is Russian kind of tell me about the naming of Russian children? Because I thought Ivanova meant daughter of Ivan. But we learned later that Susan's father's name was Sergei. Now, my family being part Russian, that kind of has always intrigued me, because I thought, you know, Ivanova was daughter of, and Ivanovich means son of. So if someone who is Russian can clarify that for me, where that naming convention came from, that would be awesome. But Ivanova makes another comment, I am Russian, doctor, we understand these things, when she was talking to Dr. Franklin, and they were burying a body, for lack of a better word. They were just committing his soul to the deep. It was a man who was assassinated, and the soul hunter sensed his death in the ISO lab, even though he was isolated on a different part of Babylon 5, had no direct knowledge. Somehow he knew this guy was going to die. And it freaked everybody out. And one of the other things too is the soul hunter ends up arguing with Delenn over what happens to the soul after death. And like I said before, that's always kind of intrigued me. My family was a little bit different. When I was a little kid, about 1.5 years old, my dad had a major heart attack. And this would have been in 1974. And my dad wasn't given very long to live. Only given about 4 to 5 years at most to live. Now, he actually lived 17 years, just because he was so damn ornery. But my mom kind of raised me with the knowledge that your dad's not going to be around forever, kiddo. And you're going to have to get used to living your life without your dad present. And so a lot of kids kind of thought that was unnerving at school. until I explained to them about my dad's health condition. But, you know, in an Eastern culture, they would have just picked up on that and like, yeah, so everyone dies. You know, it's one of those constants of life, death and taxes. As the good saying goes, was it Abraham Lincoln who said that? I'm trying to remember who said that originally. But anyways, comment down below. It'd be interesting what culture you come from and what is your view on death. Having been a nurse, I've had to deal a lot with death, and this is even before the current pandemic. And I'm deliberately disguising the word, because if I say the actual word, that something that's like panorama, if I say the actual word, my understanding is that will get my video flagged and set aside for further scrutiny, and that can take forever. So you'll see a lot of people talking and deliberately corrupting the word for something that's along the lines of pandemic. But even before the pandemic, I remember when I worked in a nursing home, I was the highest ranked medical professional. We didn't have medical doctors on staff, and I was the only RN on night shift. And I would have to go in when a patient died. The CNAs would page me, and I would have to go up, assuming they were, you know, no heroic measures, and then I would, you know, listen to their heart and lungs for a minute, verify that they were indeed passed away, and then I would notify the doctor, notify the family, and then call a special service to come pick them up. Anyway, after all of that work, one night I came into work, and it was after there was a shortage of antibiotics one year, and I had 9 residents die in an 8-hour shift. Every 30 to 45 minutes, my pager was going off, and you're saying that math doesn't quite work out. It's because the CNAs usually took a long break for their dinner break right in the middle of their shift. But about every 30 to 45 minutes, my pager was going off. David so-and-so in room such and such passed away. There are no code. Okay, so I would go in, deal with that. It got to the point where it was so bad, and this was region-wide, that the guy at the local service that we called to pick up the bodies to transport them to the morgue finally said, David, could you please stop calling me tonight? I'm 32 bodies backed up right now as already, and until day shift comes in, there's just no way I can catch up. And so I had to make notes and notify the family and tell the day shift supervisor, here's all of the patients that I haven't called because the service is so far behind. It was like, I want to say 5 or 6 bodies that had to stay in bed. You know, of course we cleaned them up and gave them new linens and everything. We didn't, you know, leave them lying in filth or anything like that, in case the family wanted to say their final goodbyes before the mortuary came and got them. So, you know, just one of the most horrific days of my life. And I talked to several nurses during the current pandemic, and they've said that they've actually had worse happen on their shift, that they were every 10 to 15 minutes. And they were setting records left and right for how many bodies that they were having to transport to the mortuary. And that, like me, they are actually having bodies backed up and staying in bed because there was just no room for them in the mortuary. Which one doctor actually came to me, and I was talking to her on Facebook, and she said, David, in about 2 or 3 years, we're going to have another pandemic of nurses and doctors with PTSD. It's that bad. She said, if you were to go back on your unit right now and talk to the nurses and stuff, it's just like the walking war wounded. So, you know, I guess my question for everyone is, during the pandemic, has your views on death changed? And what do you think about a species that's advanced enough to capture your soul and put it in a bottle for future reference, basically? Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think that's just the most horrible thing you've ever seen? And also, I also wrote down in my questions, do soul hunters save Vorlons? So I'm wondering with a species, because we know that the Vorlons seldom die, but does the Soul Hunter come and capture them afterwards? Or can they capture them? Or are Vorlon's souls trapped in special bodies or something like that? I guess that goes to the heart of the question of what exactly is a Vorlon at the heart of everything. Another thing that he when he's trying to rip the soul out of Delenn, he gets a glimpse into her life, and he says, "You would plan such a thing? You would do such a thing?" And it could reference any host of things in her life, but I've always wondered, because we learned later that Delenn was the final vote that started the Earth-Minbari War, and that they brought along Sheridan on board to one of their vessels to interrogate him towards the end, decided that Minbari souls were being reborn into humans, and that's why they had to stop the Earth-Minbari War. Sorry, I gave you a little bit of a spoiler alert there, but he also makes another comment that to Sinclair, after when they were fighting, and Sinclair turns the little soul ripper machine around, and he says, he screams at Sheridan, "She is Satai, and they're using you." And he's like, "What the hell's a Satai, and what is she using me for?" And that other mini story arc kind of gets a bit of a boost right there at that point. Basically, the Soul Hunter was stopped, of course, rips off, turns it around, and kills the Soul Hunter. Back in laboratory, when Dr. Franklin is giving Delenn the once-over, he remarks that losing that much blood would have killed a human, and he said that's probably why they did so well during the Earth-Minbari War, was no matter how much pain, no matter how much suffering, no matter even how much blood they lose, they still keep coming at you. And so that kind of spawns a little bit of a thing. And Delenn makes another comment too. "I knew you were right," or "I knew you would come. We were right about you." And he kind of remarks to Dr. Franklin, "What the hell did she mean about that?" And that ties in with the storyline of she is Satai, they're using you. That Sinclair finally gets whiff of the time that he was taken on board a Minbari vessel during the Earth-Minbari War. So that's kind of another little thing to look at. And the scene, or the episode, kind of ends. Delenn finds the Soul Hunter's collection, these little globe things that contain people's souls, and towards the end you can see her ripping them open, and these little points of light, and she's crying and very happy at the same time that she was letting these souls loose. Having to do with the Minbari theory of death, that the universe as a whole peels off little bits of pieces of itself. We find this out later in the Minbari views on death, and that if you take those souls away, that the universe as a whole suffers. And so Delenn believes that by freeing these souls, she's taking the little bits of the universe that have been lost and putting it back out there. If you believe in like a Buddhist or that type of a viewpoint, you would say that she's letting them go to be reborn either into a heaven realm or a hell realm, and that their natural fate can now be decided by the universe. Oh, want to apologize. You might hear this weird sound in the background every so often. It is October, and I live at 4,500 feet, and it's cold outside, so you might hear my heaters kicking on and off, and you'll almost definitely see a cat or two in the background, and as they allow it, I will go ahead and introduce them. Anyways, hope you all have a good rest of your weekend, as I'm recording this on a Sunday. And I'm going to start off with, or continue next on to episode 3.